But going into university, being confronted with this freedom, that was a massive challenge for me. I wanted to explore these new freedoms like drinking, clubbing and partying and maybe, my faith took a turn for the worse at that point and I found myself in bad situations. It's those moments that I do remember just feeling really far away from God, just realizing this isn't really where I want to be. This freedom isn't all it worked out to be. Regret is something which can be a good motivator for bringing you back to God in those moments. And to have that freedom taken away was a good thing for me and a turning point in my life to suddenly think, what do I want for the next 10 years? What do I want to look like when I'm 30 or 40? Hold on and be patient because God's timing is working in your life. Good question. We're praying for...
Do you feel lonely? All right, welcome everyone to episode number 6. Let's just kick off with a few questions about you.
No problem. My name's Daniel Bradshaw, and I'm a Christian. I have been since I was little, just because of my family and growing up in it. I live in Cornwall in the very southwest of Britain. I'm a graphic designer. I'm a father as of 6 months ago, so got a little family down here, which is certainly different. And yeah, just quite a curious person, I'd describe myself as. Just like finding out lots about everything, flitting from one little hobby to the next. So I guess I'm a bit creative person, being a designer. I've started doing a lot more speaking, so like public speaking in front of the church on Sundays or like Bible classes, which are a bit sort of more in-depth study. I guess some creativity can come into that. Like writing a talk is quite a task. You definitely know yourself. Like knowing where to start, creating a good structure which will keep people locked in for whatever time it might be, half an hour. So I've got creativity can work against you in that regard because often gives me too much to say. And I'm sort of trying to cram it in because I've got too many ideas sometimes. but it also gives you a unique perspective on the subject, I guess.
Let's go back to the start. You are baptized, but let's start maybe in your family. How did that start? Like, what was life growing up? Did you attend the church regularly on a Sunday? And kind of like, what were your upbringings and how did that then lead to your commitment of baptism?
Yeah, so definitely grew up in a very solid family environment with my parents teaching me those sort of integral values from an early age. But I also found church life when I was younger just really exciting and fun. So I think the initial attraction to church when I was very young, say like in my, between 5 and 10 sort of age, was just the fact that there was so much going on. There were so many other young people, people to play football with, people to, I don't know, wrestle or whatever it might have been. And so perhaps that wasn't like a brilliant motivation for going, but obviously it went alongside with the principles and learning about God, Sunday school, things like that. But that excitement, the fact that there were other young people who were on the same page, sort of spiritually, people who knew about God, they weren't any bullies and that sort of thing, which you'd find in school. So there was that initial leaning towards my friends in the church and those with those values rather than the people at school who had totally different viewpoints, who didn't really want to be kind or to play civilly. They might have had issues at home and that sort of thing. So let's say that was a big part of my upbringing, having people, like-minded kids who wanted to have fun. That was probably the principal motivation for going to church. But also they were just on the same page and kind and loving people because they had loving families. So I'd say that was what it was like. Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of football, especially football, a lot of running around, like playing games like Tig and hide and seek. And then Sunday school, I've got just great memories of Sunday school, just great teachers who, got me to really be fascinated with things like maps and genealogies, which sound boring to most people probably, but that was just something that was really fascinating to do with the Bible.
So when did you decide for yourself, okay, I want to really take this seriously. I want to be part of the Christadelphian Church?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think it grew and grew, that sort of love for being there because of the people, as I said. And then we have things like youth weekends, which you obviously are well
Yeah.
acquainted with. And so that saw me going around the country, meeting new people, which was, quite scary, quite intimidating at first, coming to these environments where everyone knows one another, and if unless I went with my own friends, that was scary. But just seeing that love for Christ, that love for God and study, seeing that all over the country in different places and forming these sort of connections, that grew and grew. And I decided this is something I want for my life, for as far into the future I can see. And I guess that commitment was, it was very apparent to me that baptism was the right step to go forward with my faith. So I got baptized just before I went to university, and which I think was a good decision,
Yeah.
just because life changed dramatically after that point. I got my independence, but to be baptized, to be part of that community, and to commit was really important in keeping me in the faith, keeping me because we're all imperfect. We're all going to go through valleys. And so when I was baptized and had that community support, they could help me whenever that was failing, for myself.
And I think what you touched on is really important, that baptism is the first step, but then through life there's so many ups, so many downs. And at least I personally thought, oh yeah, when you baptized, life will be amazing. Like you sorted, but that's only the beginning, and it can get quite rocky. But you've got that support network, which is fantastic. You touched
Yeah.
on your valleys, so let's go into some of these. Is there a valley moment that you want to share with people, with your audience here, where you felt tested by God?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if it was a test from God or just something within myself, to be honest, because it was that time of being new to baptized life, if you like,
Yeah.
being new to that commitment, as I said, going into university, and you're confronted with all the sort of desires and pleasures, and just doing whatever you want. That's what university is all about, is what do you want, what do you want to study. And maybe that's something that's changed in the last, I don't know, 20 years. University might not have been like that at one point. It might be just the state of the world. But going into university, being confronted with this freedom, that was a massive challenge for me. And I think, like I said, it was from within. I wanted to explore these new freedoms, like drinking, clubbing and partying, and maybe, yeah, my faith took a turn for the worse at
Yeah.
that point, and I found myself in bad situations, like being in the center of a city in the middle of the night, and there's bad people around, there's bad influences and alcohol and whatever, those sort of things. Nothing crazy, but it's those moments that I do remember, just feeling really far away from God, and but also a turning point, because it made me realize it might, looking back, maybe the next day or even in those moments themselves, just realizing this isn't really where I want to be.
Mm.
This freedom isn't all it worked out to be. It's not as great as people make out. It's not all fun and freedom and, these seemingly good attributes of the world we live in, how much freedom we have, but realizing this rock which I had under me in terms of that church environment, that solid family structure based on the values of the Bible, I want to stick to that, really. And I
Yeah,
think from that point, I've become more and more committed, I'd hope, with many, many slips along the way.
totally. I think it's a very relatable thing. I've been there. It's yeah, it's human. It's normal that you go down the road, you're like, hey, how does this feel? How does the freedom feel that we feel like we do have? When you were in those situations, and you obviously said that you felt really low, really far away from God, what were you like? What were your thoughts and feelings? Were you happy in a sense, or were you feeling regret already?
Yeah, I think regret is something which can be a good motivator for bringing you back to God in those moments. Yeah, it was a sort of despair with myself, I guess, at times.
Yeah,
But then, yeah, like you said, there's that happiness element, these things which might bring dopamine to your
yeah.
system, these things which might make you forget in the moment what is truly important. There are definitely elements of that. You know, you can hide those principles within you quite easily. I don't think people live their lives often with that sort of mask on. I am enjoying this situation, really. But then if you're honest with yourself, and it's something which my family definitely rooted in me, to be honest with yourself and to be honest before God, that's been a very important reason why I rejected that way of life, because I was honest with myself and I thought, you know, this really isn't truly a good thing. Even though I might feel happy, I might be enjoying myself, I might be getting that dopamine into your system. It's about seeing what's important, being honest with your situation.
That's that's exactly the trick. I think there's so many ways to feel dopamine that don't involve, in this case, alcohol. Just having a to-do list and ticking off a thing. That's
Yeah.
also a hit of dopamine that you can feel. But what you said is very relatable, and I think often think about Jacob wrestling with God, like that kind of relationship that we have this wrestle that's going on, that we're always fighting the pleasures of our flesh, and it can be easy to then fall into a cycle and just keep going down and just spiral down. Is there a way where you were then able to break out of that cycle, and how did you do it?
It's a good question. Just whilst you mentioned that, I've got a book. It's on my shelf. It's called We Who Wrestle with God.
Oh, okay. Yes, Jordan
And
Peterson.
yeah. So I haven't read it yet. I hope I'm right in saying this. You mentioned Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. I think the word Israel in the Hebrew actually means to wrestle with God or to be a prince
Exactly.
with God. So yeah, it's truly a core principle of the Bible, isn't it? So to answer your question, I think it's maybe something that you don't break out of as human beings. You know, Christ was wrestling with his human nature to the very end, wasn't he? So perhaps it's not something to escape as such, but when those thoughts and those human impulses arise in our hearts and in our minds, is about choosing life. You know, that fundamental question that
To
the
resist.
Israelites are asked: choose life. And there's two choices in life, aren't there?
Yeah.
And it's every situation you have to make that choice. I don't think you make that choice once and then everything's plain sailing. I think it'll keep coming up. It'll keep rising to the surface. So in a way, life is about wrestling with human impulses. It's perhaps even wrestling with God, because we might have questions for him which seemingly aren't answered. And Jacob certainly had that in his life. He was wrestling with his situation.
Yeah. Yes. So what you say is really profound. I think, as you say, life is a total constant wrestle until the end. That's why we're human. That's why we have this flesh. But I guess my point is that how could you then, when was the point where you realized, okay, I want to resist. I want to get out of this situation. Was there a trigger or something that helped you to realize, okay, now I need to change?
I believe it's all rooted in our conscience. I think that's truly the part of us which makes those decisions for good, to make those decisions for good. And I think that was something from a young age that my mum especially instilled in me, to have this honesty with God. During COVID, we were talking about this before we began, just how COVID was quite a transition point for a lot of people. It was either for good or for bad. And for me, it was a way of escape, actually. to have that time by myself or with my family, not having that freedom. And that's what the crux point, isn't it? For some people who were on the right path at the time of COVID, to have that their freedom to do good taken away from them, that was a really bad thing. But for me, I was in a bad place, and it was the freedom itself, my free will, that was my temptation. That was what was leading me in that bad path. And to have that freedom taken away was a good thing for me, and a turning point in my life to suddenly think, what do I want for the next 10 years? What do I want to look like in when I'm 30 or 40?
Yeah.
And yeah, those questions certainly came to the surface. I guess it was a time I was maturing, I was growing up, and I could choose between those two paths.
So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, that your conscience has developed over time, and I think every person develops a conscience, hopefully, through their upbringing, through the influences they have as children, as young people, as teenagers, and as adults. And this journey then affects every decision along the way. And you're saying that once you had to go back 2020 back home, that then you could connect to your roots, kind of thing, and then also find the trust and the love in the family, as well as, yeah, as you say, have that freedom taken away, but channel it into something that is good, that then shaped you to be who you are today. And that is a fantastic, uplifting, encouraging story, especially from a time where, as you say, most people went through the hardest time of their life. And I think for everyone it was hard and it was painful.
Yeah.
But to get to this point
Yeah.
is really encouraging.
The freedom to study the Bible, the freedom to go back to my roots, as you said, that wasn't taken away. And so that was that seed of hope within that dark time. We Zoom, the birth of Zoom, and we're now called Zoomers, aren't we? Gen Zers. And that was an opportunity for me, at least, for our global community to reach out. And I remember that being a time of just so many talks, so many meetings online to connect with our fellow Christians, and that was just lovely. This wasn't
Okay.
all doom and gloom.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying that you were able to then engage with quite a few other people online, and that's really helped you at that time?
Yeah, because obviously youth groups couldn't meet anymore and that sort of thing. And our youth group at the time, which was rugby, and there were maybe one or two of us who were at the age where we were sort of being called upon to be leaders of some kind. You know, most of the youth group was younger than us.
Yeah.
Most of the youth group weren't as outgoing, or perhaps just in need of that leadership, I suppose. And so it was an opportunity for me and one or two other friends to take charge of that youth group, make sure it kept going, make sure that connection between fellow believers was kept going. Everyone can sort of map their lives out pre-COVID and post-COVID now, and
Yeah.
for me it was a clear, I think it was a clear turning point. Before was I was going on a bad path.
Yeah.
Perhaps even though I'd committed to Christ, I'd been baptized. Post-COVID seems to me to be a brighter and more mature person, I
Yeah.
think.
Were there people on this journey that really helped you, that you maybe would entitle as mentors, that helped you to the place you are now?
Question. Not sure. I think in terms of mentors, I think our generation is lacking them for sure. There were always those solid rocks in my life, like my mum and dad, and
Yeah.
but also brothers who in the same sort of way took charge of the global community themselves and launched sort of study sessions. So there was a Revelation series which hundreds of people tuned into each week. and it included feedback and discussion afterwards and that sort of thing. So that there were those mentors, but also for me, I think motivation was my now wife. She was sort of just my girlfriend at the time, or not even, because we met just before COVID, and we didn't see each other for like 6 months,
Wow,
and
that's
it
hard.
was, yeah, it was hard at that time of COVID. Having just met each other, it could have easily fallen apart. But she was just an amazing person to be talking to all the time during that time,
Yeah.
and yeah, so no like standout figures who were mentors, but motivational people for sure.
That's basically what I would say a mentor can be. I think we have this high expectation of mentor being someone who we call every day and who we talked about everything. I feel like your wife, generally any spouse, can be such a encouragement. I find that when I talk to Bron, also all the worries are suddenly half as big because she shares half the load. I think that is really important. Also very important basis for marriage. And maybe if you want to touch on this, like you've also been married for, I don't actually know how long. How long has it been?
It's been a year and a half.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a year and a half. What have you found? What have you found helpful advice that you'd like to share with anyone who's maybe younger, who's like, "Hey, I want to get married," or someone who's been married for a long time, who's maybe wants
it's
some
great.
input?
Yeah, no, it's great. Great segue, Chris. Yeah, no, advice for young couples or just young people. I'd say couple of things really. One, I'll direct this to sort of younger people who are maybe looking for their partner and might feel lost at this point, might think there's no one out there for me. Perhaps you're a Christian and you're struggling with the idea that there aren't enough Christian eligible people my age for me to pursue or get together with, and you might be thinking, "Oh, I might actually just look elsewhere. I might find someone who isn't on the same page as me because there's no other option. I need to have this partner, hopefully soon, and maybe that's something you're struggling with. And I think some good advice here is just hold on and be patient because God's timing is working in your life and He wants you to be patient with this process. It can take so much longer than you think. It certainly felt long for me, it felt long for my wife, it felt like we were searching forever and there was no one out there. And then out of the blue, we met each other. So patience for one. And when we're talking about what people might be looking for in you, you need to be the right person for that eligible partner. Your outlook must be, who can I find, or that they look attractive, they're very nice, they have all these attributes that I might like. But if you yourself aren't there, if you yourself aren't the right person for that person, then at the end of the day, it's never going to work. So if you know you're lacking in your faith or you're lacking in your maturity, whatever it might be, you need to be working on those things. You need to be trying to develop as a Christian, as a disciple, and focusing on the right things. I think the verse I always go back to is "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you." That's a very helpful verse, I find, because if your perspective, if your concentration is on the kingdom of God fundamentally, then you won't have to worry about whether you'll find a partner. You won't have to worry about time that might take because it will happen in the right amount of time, in God's timing, if you are developing and becoming a better disciple of Christ. That must be our focus. And I think that's a helpful piece of advice for someone.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And sorry, but the second thing I was going to say about advice for married couples, I suppose, is just communication. I think it's a very simple point. Just always being open, honest, and when conflict arises, when you might have an argument or you might get into a pickle with your partner or your wife, or your husband for that matter, probably more likely. You need to not let the sun go down on that anger, first of all. But
Yeah.
perhaps a little bit of space might be needed, a little bit of time for you to both collect your thoughts, collect your argument, whatever, or maybe even drop your argument. Perhaps you realize that it was a silly and pointless thing to be arguing over. Take that time, but never let it go too long. Never hide it under the surface. Never grim and bear it either. If you've got an issue with your partner, obviously be forgiving with them. But if it's coming up time and time again, you need to be communicating that, because that one-to-one conversation, that flashing out those issues, the communication is so key. I'd say that's some advice
Yeah.
for married couples
And
or
I
just
think
girlfriend and boyfriends.
exactly that's the point. When you start dating, first of all, I always say date to marry. I think that's really important. But then you can build on this communication in the beginning. When I think back to our 6 years of dating, in the beginning we were struggling to communicate on a level that would work for both of us, and it took quite a long time to just open up about everything and then tell what you're feeling on both sides.
Yeah, you're different human beings, aren't you?
Yeah,
You've got
yeah.
different coming to into it with totally different perspectives.
Exactly, exactly. You were talking about Matthew 6 as being a verse that's really helpful for you, and it talks about the kingdom in there as well. How do you focus from having been through these valleys, especially in your after uni, in during uni times, and then to focus on what is in the future? How can you do that in your daily life? Is there some routine that helps you look towards the future and the victory?
Yeah, great question. I think for me personally, not everyone might be able to relate to this, but having a family and having that partnership, that marriage, which I have with my wife, that amazing partnership. We're walking together on this journey, and so that's also a motivation. It's a motivation to, as a man, as a husband, to be the one who is planning for the future, the one who is making sure our joint sight is on the kingdom above all else. Obviously, it's the responsibility of both of you. But when you're a family and when you've got that responsibility, really. I've got that responsibility for my wife. I've got that responsibility for my daughter. The way I prepare for the kingdom is by looking after them, making sure our faith is in the right things. You might be able to hear a baby
Yeah,
crying
perfect
in the
timing.
background.
It illustrates your
Yeah,
point.
yeah, perfectly. Yeah, making sure that those two people in my life, those people who are dependent on me, and likewise my wife, who I'm dependent on in many ways, just making sure we're, again, that communication, making sure we're on the same page about things, making sure when something comes up in the church, in the ecclesia, that we're both we both chatted about that situation. We're both working towards a solution, or we're both trying to be Christ in whatever situation it might be. And so that sounds quite inward focusing, like quite perhaps narcissistic, like we are protecting our own family and sort of thing. But I think once you've done that, your focus then can go outside, because
Yeah.
you're together, you're working towards the same thing, and your perspective can be to help other people. You can start donating to charity, you can start visiting the sick and the needy, but without that initial strong bond in your family, I've noticed this in relationships close to me, or just from observing from afar even. Often couples are going different places, they're going and doing different things, they're separating and seemingly pursuing different paths, not on the same page. And maybe that's a wrong judgment of mine. It's not for me to know what's going on in every marriage or every relationship, but for me, I think it's important that the family unit is strong and going in the same direction, and then you can point that direction onto those external things. You can be focusing on your brothers and sisters and the elderly and the young people and all these places where we can express our faith and our love. I guess that's what I'm trying to illustrate. The way we prepare for the kingdom, as Christ illustrates in the parable of the sheep and the goats, is by helping our community, helping our family, being as Christ to everyone we meet. Because ultimately, then we're developing our character. Then our minds are changing to be like Christ, and at the at the end of days, when he returns, he might see himself in us, perhaps, and that is our hope, and that's our focus from my perspective.
The key aspect of directing a relationship, of having family and having that unity, is to fill up your glass first before you can fill up others. I remember one of my first videos, I actually got a glass like this and I put it on a tray and was like filling it up, basically to illustrate that if your glass is half full like this, you can't give to other people, because you kind of like, you need to fill up your own energy. So it's really, really important to love your neighbor as yourself, to love others as yourself, and that aspect of it's also okay if, for example, on a Wednesday or even if it's a Sunday, it's like, okay, family goes first, because if you build that family relationship, if you build that bond, then you can give to others. I think that's very, very powerful what you're saying there. So if you had to look back on your last couple of years, what has been like one aspect that you'd say that's amazing? It's amazing way how God has shaped your path, or something surprising that you'd be like, oh, that's not one way that I would have expected God to work with me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just every time I wake up and look out the window and see the Cornish landscape, I think about the path that my life has taken and how crazy it is. I grew up in the north of England, in
Yeah.
Manchester, a city, like suburban life, really. It was a busy, as I've described, it was a busy and exciting place to be. School life was busy, ecclesial life was crazy fun and busy. And then I moved to the Midlands, where things are like 10 times that, and there's something on every weekend, there's something on every church there, and your friendship group just grows and grows, and you meet new people all the time. And then I met my wife, who's Cornish, and we moved down here I moved down here a couple of years before we were married. We got married, and now we've got our own family down here, and it's a crazy journey through it all. And my purpose has shifted and changed throughout that. And I think I do believe my purpose is being most fulfilled at this time, because it's a smaller church. It's a smaller environment where my lack of experience and my small amount of knowledge can be put to work, because there's elderly in the meeting, there's not much youth, there's not many people who are willing to spend loads of time and energy on the ecclesia and building it out and doing these creative things which can bring the entire church closer to God. And so it's a blessing, really, that I am just as busy as I ever was. It's a busy time for me now, and yet it's such a small and close-knit place. So your work is sort of multiplied, if that makes any sense at all.
It does. Do you feel lonely at times?
No, I never feel lonely at all. Perhaps it's to do with my sort of optimistic mindset, where I am just always looking on the bright side of things. I also don't mind being by myself, being in nature, that sort of thing. But yeah, when you've got that close-knit group, there's that responsibility to look after those nearby, to look after my family. And I think when your focus is on others, when your focus is on those really close connections, those people who need you, the elderly, the youngsters, my 6-month-old baby, it is pretty hard to be lonely. And I take that for granted every day. So I've got to say that I need to be praising and thanking God for that. The fact that I have so many people that I can spend my sort of love and my creativity on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess to just as an aside to counteract that a little bit, when you can get burnt out, can't you? And things aren't perfect. I'm not going to ever say that things are perfect, but it would be wrong of me to say that I feel lonely or anything like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm at a point in my life where things are very blessed. So
wonderful.
I pray for people who aren't and who are struggling with those things which you've dealt with in your videos, and just the amazing points you make. I pray they reach the right people. And hopefully
Yes.
this does.
Yeah, exactly. If we look to the road ahead, what are you currently praying for, and what do you want to pray for?
Yeah. Good question. We're praying for this is my wife and I. We pray every night, and we tend to write things down as well, which helps us to remember the things which we have a post-it note on the wall or something, things we need to pray about. And
That's
there's
great.
people close to us who need to be prayed for. Those who are getting older and more unsure of themselves. Just taking a step back from the ecclesia, perhaps people who were presiding and speaking and helping out all the time are now struggling with their own age and things like that. So we pray for them, and that's the real that's where our focus is, because there are people in our lives who need it. And then we're praying for young people to come and support us because we're smaller and do struggle with the amount of workload, which, like I just said in the previous point, is a great thing for me, who does have a lot of energy. But it takes its toll on the older ones. It takes its toll on those who are less willing or have different personalities.
Yeah.
So we're praying for families and young people to join us down here. God might have a different plan. He might wish for us to move somewhere else in the future. But for now, when we have this good thing to protect and to build and to grow, we're praying for that.
May God answer your prayers. Is there
Thank you.
something that you wish you knew earlier? This is a hard question,
Mm,
but anything you like, if I was maybe 5 years ago or a
yeah.
bit longer.
Things I wish I knew when I was 18. I don't think I'm old or wise enough to have a good, clear answer on this. I'm probably still in the age of making mistakes. Don't know how you feel about that.
Exactly. Your 20s are all about that.
Yeah, yeah. I think timing. That's something I wish I knew in my teenagers when I was looking for a partner. Most fundamentally, though I didn't put that pressure on myself on timing and
Yeah.
things going quickly. I think I'm quite an impatient person. I just want things to be sorted right now whilst I have the means to do so, and it's something I wrestle with. But yeah, something I wish I knew when I was in that stage of life, that sort of 16 to 18-year-old phase. Just just don't worry about timing. Don't worry that things are going slowly. Don't worry that seemingly life is very slow and you're stuck in a rut. Because God is working something out, and it's for up to you to act and to grow, because God has given us the freedom to do that, and not to just sit back and relax and wait for things to happen or wait for things to become perfect. And because it doesn't without you taking the first step, and perhaps taking the wrong step and then learning, and then but yeah, just not being worried about how slow or stop-start things were going.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. If I was a person who's going through a valley right now, what would you say to me?
Look up at the peak and focus on that peak. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Don't forget to hydrate and keep looking after yourself. You will slowly get up to where you once was. Like I've said multiple times, God's timing is perfect. Your timing might not be. You might make mistakes. You might go into an even deeper valley, and lean on those amazing biblical stories, because that is what the scriptures is about. It's people going through valleys, and then you can also dwell on those stories of people reaching the peak, reaching the top of the mountain of God, like Moses did. Just look forward to that time, because it will come if you're patient, and and you put all the right things where they need to be.
Thank you so much.